If they believe in a system change enough, anyone can make that happen. And entrepreneurship is a route to making that happen. The entrepreneurs, I guess, that inspire us the most and we believe to go on to build really big businesses are ones where they believe what most other people at that point in time think about as impossible.
Today, I'm joined by Camilla Dolan, co-founder of Eka Ventures.
But I think it's that power to believe and see things other people can't see, and then the resilience and the consistency to drive delivery behind that.
A leading voice for a new kind of venture capital, where businesses create returns by solving real societal problems.
I really experienced firsthand the impact it has on individuals' daily lives when a system goes wrong, and wanted to focus my career on investing to move a system forward.
Backing founders tackling systemic change in sustainable consumption and consumer health.
90% of emissions start in sort of consumer supply chains, trillions of dollars of opportunity there.
Her work is about proving that the companies shaping a better future can also become the category leaders of tomorrow.
Please do go out and build the companies that you're thinking about, help drive that change.
Welcome, Camilla.
Thank you, Richard. It's great to be here.
Great to have you on The Whole Leader. So, Camilla, for our listeners, do you want to give us a bit of an introduction about yourself and maybe tell us more about what I mentioned in the intro there about shared value, which really seems to be at the heart of everything you're doing?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe for people that haven't come across the concept of shared value, I can sort of explain what that is. So shared value was a concept initially coined by Michael Porter in an article in 2011, which described how he viewed the future state of the economy and how you could reinvent capitalism for businesses to do both societal impact in parallel with creating economic value. John, my business partner, and I had been sort of trying to figure out what was the sort of shape of commercial impact investing and how to articulate it. And when we first read that, we felt he articulated it better than we ever could have done from scratch, describing how you can build leading companies with sustainability and societal benefit in parallel with commercial benefit. And through doing so, you could change whole sort of economic structures. We'd started to come across this idea in an early investment we made into a business called Gusto, which was focused on personalized grocery. The founder of Timo sort of described his vision for what the future of grocery looked like. At the time, supermarkets had 1% to 2% sort of operating margin, and the food system has 30% food waste. When he looked at that 30% food waste, he saw an amazing margin opportunity and felt that if you could use technology to reduce that food waste, then you would be able to reinvest that into higher quality food at lower prices, at better margin. And we think that's a really fantastic example of shared value. When we first made that investment, it sounded incredibly speculative at the time. They were sending out a few thousand boxes, doing a few 100,000 of revenue. That business is now doing over 300 million annually in the UK, really profitable and helping people to eat in an affordable, nutritious way on a daily basis.
What a remarkable story, and such a positive one, you know, when you think about how we need to change so many of the systems that we live in. And that's just a really practical, great example of it happening. And as you say, the notion of shared value starts to make a really, I guess, clear statement as to how those things can be achieved. And I guess they're most commonly achieved, those things start through entrepreneurs with a vision, and that's something that's close to your heart. If we kind of wind back to the start, you've been an entrepreneur, from what I've read, for quite a long time. I mean, even before you started your university studies, you were an entrepreneur. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. Wow, that is pulling up the archives. But that's definitely right. I guess I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So my father left school at 15, started work initially as a tailor, and then has been through many different industries. And my mother was an artist. So for me, the sort of expectation wasn't to go to university, and originally started building a sort of small business, buying and selling horses. And then at some point sort of recognized that I really wanted to build a bigger business and be part of a larger structural change. And that led me to go to university, which I am eternally eternally grateful for.
You were actually a horse trader.
I was actually a horse trader for my sins and learned a huge amount through that experience, which I look on very for a favourite memory.
How do you make a good margin on a horse? What do you look for?
Well, that's a good question. So actually very much like entrepreneurship, I think one of the things I definitely learned is that you can't be right every time. So I probably sold around 40 horses during my teenage years. And I would say for every 4 we bought, 3 we would sell at a really great profit margin and 1 we would sell at a loss. And that's definitely something I've taken into my sort of thinking around investing in companies as well.
I was chatting to my sales director where I work this week about entrepreneurship, and he was giving me his kind of view on what entrepreneurship was, and he said something which I quite liked, which he said it's the magic of creating order from chaos, which you can take in lots of ways. I'd be really interested in what you think is in the DNA of a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's a really fantastic question. It's something we're constantly sort of asking ourselves. I think probably the biggest thing is the entrepreneurs, I guess, that inspire us the most, and we believe sort of go on to build really big businesses, are ones where they believe what most other people at that point in time think about as impossible. And taking it back to that example of sort of Gusto and personalized grocery, I remember doing the market sizing at the time. And at the time, they're in a category called food boxes. And that market was extremely small. And when we sized up that market, I came up with a very small market. Timo the founder came up with a very big market. Today, the market is infinitely bigger than my market size. And he reminds me of that regularly. But I think it's that power to believe and see things other people can't see. And then the resilience and the consistency to drive delivery behind that, even during periods that are tough, which they always are at some point in the journey.
So the vision to see things that others can't, and then the focus to deliver it. And you're right with the food boxes. I mean, you see them advertised on the TV all the time now, don't you? And it's become a thing, and it wasn't a thing 8-10 years ago.
100%. And so many families I know are now eating those when they were non-believers at the start.
Absolutely. And so after the horse business, you did decide to go to university. You went to Oxford and you studied law. What was in your thinking then? Often when people choose law, it's because they're thinking about how they can make a positive impact. Was that on your mind? What was going on for you?
Yeah, great question. So I was really fortunate to get into Oxford to study law. And really, I sort of wanted to study law as I saw that as the foundation of both business and then how society operates. Law at Oxford is called jurisprudence. So it's very philosophically based all around sort of systems and how the sort of economy operates.
And from Oxford, your first job was working at Bain, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you were working in sort of financial services related technology. And from what I've read, you got to work in a few different places. So you were in Japan and you were in the US. And as I was doing my research, the question that I wanted to ask you was how working in those different cultures in that early stage of your career has sort of exposed you to the way different people work in different places and different cultures. What do you remember from those days?
Yeah, great question. So I started my career at Bain. So I spent 5 years there. My first day was the start of the financial crisis. So actually the day Lehman Brothers crashed, always ingrained in my mind. And so saw a real spectrum. On the one side, spent about a year in Ireland working on the Irish banking crisis. And that was juxtaposed with 6 months in San Francisco, just as the sort of mobile era came out and having businesses like Uber and Dropbox come into the office and describe their vision for the future. So all about growth, whereas the other side, it was all about sort of managing a crisis situation. So really learned a lot about different mindsets, different attitudes, and the ability of technology to change industries and entrepreneurs.
I can imagine that felt very strange being in those very different places and those different worlds. And I remember what was happening to Ireland during the banking crisis and had some exposure to Silicon Valley at the time, and they had their minds on very different things. And I think I've heard you speak publicly before about that exposure to the banking crisis, and that's how I think you started to form some of your views on things that needed to change. Is that right?
Yeah, that's definitely right. The Irish banking crisis was a very revolutionary moment for me. So we set up the call centers to help people manage paying their mortgages through that time so they didn't lose their homes. And I really experienced firsthand the impact it has on individuals' daily lives when a system goes wrong, and wanted to focus my career on investing in companies and to move a system forward so that in the future, those companies help people live healthy, happy lives rather than lives ladled with debt.
Yeah, I remember the banking crisis clearly a long time ago now. It's quite sobering, isn't it, when the system doesn't support, the consumers in the end that it's supposed to, and it's all gone horribly wrong.
Horrific.
Yeah.
And I think it really is the individuals that get impacted when that system goes wrong. And I think the Irish banking crisis was the best example of, or a very good example of that.
Yeah, totally. And so something after that changed for you, because you left Bain, didn't you? And you went into venture capital, which is going to bring us up to what you're doing now. And that's where we first met, when you were at MMC. Maybe we can talk just for a minute about that change for you, because you were working on setting up call centers and working on the technology, and then within a couple of years you were trying to spot the winners in that technology space.
Yeah, it was definitely quite a transition. I think I was really fortunate at the time I spent in San Francisco, which really opened up my mind to what entrepreneurship was, to meet all of these people that believed they could change that system in a positive way. They could build the companies that defined the future. So when I came back to the UK, I really wanted to be part of building that system for the UK. Mm-hmm. Met John, who I know was fortunate enough to invest and be on the board of CloudSense. Who described his vision for building the UK's leading venture firm. Really wanted to sort of join him on the journey and learn from him, and Bruce and Alan, the co-founders of MMC.
And then fast forward a few more years, and we get to the start of your journey at Eka with John. And I think you'd raised your first fund in 2021.
Yes, we closed our first fund, £68 million fund, in 2021.
And it seems to have gone from strength to strength. I gather you've now got, 123 million under management at the moment, which means things must be going well. Maybe you could tell us about the categories, the areas that you've chosen to invest in, because Eka's got. We've talked about shared value, and you've explained how you kind of got to this point through your work in the banking crisis about wanting to make a difference to systems. You've been very kind of clear cut in what you've chosen to invest in. And am I right in thinking sustainable consumption and consumer health are the two areas?
Yes. So within shared value, we're really focused on sustainable consumption, consumer health. We think those are two enormous opportunities to create shared value, sustainable consumption. 90% of emissions start in sort of consumer supply chains. So that's all about decarbonizing those big consumer supply chains, mm-hmm. trillions of dollars of opportunity there. And consumer health, which is about shifting our healthcare system from a treatment-led, reactive system into a proactive, preventative healthcare system. Mm-hmm. Again, 10% of global GDP is spent on healthcare, so much economic opportunity as well as societal opportunity there.
And I think I've heard you talk about sort of the difference between the work you're doing and what big companies are doing around their ESG targets, and how they're trying to sort of clean up their acts. Let me talk about that for a minute, because the work that you're doing is not about helping businesses sort of incrementally improve. It's about sort of changing the game entirely, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. So it's a great question. So we separate out impact or shared value and ESG. So we think about impact and shared value as being, what does the company do? So if that company is successful, what is the change that it's going to drive in the system? Mm-hmm. So going back to that sort of food box example, that should drive greater sustainability through the food supply chain, reduce wastage, reduce CO2 emissions associated with food, and also improve nutrition and health. The ESG side of it is focused on governance. Mm-hmm. So that's more around does the company have good environmental policies? Does it have good governance? We think that's important too. We encourage all of our companies to have good sort of ESG governance. Mm-hmm. But what we're actually focused on is driving this sort of system level change.
Yeah. I think our listeners would be really interested to hear about some examples from your portfolio of where this is happening now. You talked about Gusto, which I just know from personal experience, that's from a past investment in a previous business. So today in Eka, maybe you can give a couple of examples of the businesses that you've invested in.
So one really great example is Flock Health. So Flock Health is the UK's first CQC regulated provider of AI delivered diagnostic and treatment plans for lower back pain care. The founders of that business had this vision that AI would be able to deliver high quality healthcare in a way that was comparable and could be benchmarked to traditional healthcare. And so they've really lent into regulation as they've developed out that solution. So most recently, Flock Health has been used in Cambridge. They had a 12-week wait there at Cambridge. Lower back pain care services had a 12-week waiting list. Flock Health in a week was able to reduce that down to less than 50%. And even more excitingly, 88% of patients that use Flock have had their issues solved and they haven't had to go back into the healthcare system. So we think these types of technologies and these types of solutions really have the ability to improve lives, improve healthcare outcomes, and do that in a really low cost, affordable and accessible way.
And we hear so many sort of worries and negatives about AI. It's just super to hear it offering some real positive benefits. And I think in the space you're talking about, it's really interesting because lower back pain is one area that I suppose there's so many different things going on that people try. It's almost like there's not an obvious, if you've got an eyesight problem, you go for an eye test and you get some glasses. Lower back pain, people go and see a physio, they go and see a chiropractor, they see an osteopath, they go and see a spinal surgeon. And to be honest, the amount of options of things to do probably vast, and AI might be a great way of kind of pulling out the best bits of all of them.
It's amazing. I think so Flock does both the diagnostics and the treatment. And within their diagnostics, there's a segment of patients, as you were saying, that where those patients aren't suitable for sort of AI delivered treatment because they have something that requires a sort of surgical intervention. And their AI has flagged up scenarios where that individual needs to get urgent treatment. And they've actually stopped somebody being paralyzed through flagging that up in a scenario where they wouldn't have otherwise had access to healthcare. So it's really exciting, the power that AI has to change the healthcare system, delivering higher quality outcomes at a lower cost.
Well, I think all of our listeners are going to be kind of warmed up now, and having heard about one example from your portfolio that's doing something really interesting, maybe you'd like to share another.
Yeah, we really we're delighted to share another one in the sustainable consumption space. One of our really early investments is a business called Hived. So Hived saw that there was a huge increase in parcels being delivered to people's doors because of the rise of e-commerce, but the infrastructure behind that has really negative air pollution and CO2 sort of emission profile. And so they set out to solve that. So Hived delivers last mile logistics, fully green and electric fleet, fully optimized delivery. And really incredibly, they have the best customer service and the best net promoter scores out there because they started with a consumer first mindset to doing that. That business has since raised a Series B, scaling exceptionally fast and working with some of the UK's leading brands.
And I think those leading brands are maybe more used to traditional retailing before the shift to doorstep delivery and everyone using kind of online purchasing. And so I guess introducing partners like Hive to the mix allows them to transform and modernize their businesses.
I think that's what they're most excited about. I think the combination, it comes back to that shared value sort of aspect, the combination of both decarbonizing their supply chains whilst driving higher quality end consumer experiences through a better quality delivery is really where the magic sits in Hive. And that's enabled by extremely smart application of technology and AI in the background, which allows that real-time optimization.
And there's one other business which I was going to bring up, Camilla, because it's already been sort of publicly announced. You've been running your fund since 2021, but you've actually already had a great result with Runner, haven't you?
Thank you, Richard. So Runner is a running training app. We first invested in that business in 2022. And why we were so excited about it is it helped people learn to run safely, and then it helped people get obsessed with that sort of habit. It was growing exceptionally fast as it was like driving this movement behind that. So since we invested, that business has scaled exceptionally, and we've recently sold it to Strava. And I think this is a really great example of where the shared values thesis is able to drive sort of economic value. And it's great to have a sort of proof point around that early in the fund's life cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a result with Strava. I mean, that's the kind of best in class consumer exercise app that's out there. So, what an outcome for that whole team. They must have all been really delighted by it.
Yeah, I think the team are really delighted. I think they're particularly delighted around combining with Strava to continue to expand the impact and to bring safe running to people globally all around the world.
Brilliant. Let's go on and talk a little bit about Eka. All of these great values that you're seeing in your portfolio, I'm imagining you're bringing these things into your own business, and venture capital hasn't always had the best of reputations. Maybe you could talk to us about what you're doing in the culture of your own business to make it sort of the right place for what's happening right now and the changes you're bringing about.
It's a great question, and one we very, very rarely get asked about. So I guess when John and I sort of set up Eka, we really thought about the type of fund that we wanted to set up and the type of people we wanted to work with. So as an investment fund, we have a range of different stakeholders. So we have the investors that invest in our fund. We have the entrepreneurs that we're lucky enough to invest into. And then we have our sort of own team and the wider sort of ecosystem. So we thought about on each of those dimensions, how did we think about ensuring that that was most aligned with the sort of shared value concept? So when we think about where we've sort of raised capital from, we've been really fortunate to raise capital from individuals like yourself who are sort of mission aligned and want to help build a positive system. And then people like Guys and St. Tommy's and Better Society Capital, who are all trying to move this positive system change forward. On the entrepreneurial side, a key part of our process when deciding to work with entrepreneurs is we run something called a leadership assessment process, which is trying to understand that individual in more detail, what motivates them, what drives them, and why they want to drive towards this system change. And we think that helps us find and get the opportunity to work with those entrepreneurs that do want to drive that change. And then from an internal perspective, we've sort of built a very diverse team. So we have 60% women within the team. We thought quite carefully about things we would do and wouldn't do. So for example, when we were raising the fund, we made a decision not to hire interns as we couldn't pay them properly. And we felt that that would be an example of something that perpetuates inequality, as it would only enable people who could afford not to be paid to sort of work with us. So we sort of tried to make these conscious decisions through that. And then we've invested really heavily in the infrastructure to help support our companies improve their impact practices alongside their ESG practices when working with a range of different sort of third parties on that, including going through the B Corp process ourselves. And then in terms of the ecosystem work we do as a fund, we think about success as being making impact mainstream. And so we engage really heavily with organizations like Impact VC, where John, my business partner, is sort of one of the super trainers and on the board of that.
Well, it sounds like you're doing lots of great stuff there. And I'm kind of hearing a thread through that venture capital more broadly is earning the right to a positive reputation. Do you think that the industry is moving the right way? Is there more to be done still?
So I think there's always more to be done. But I think most people go into venture capital because they believe that entrepreneurship is the route to build a more sort of positive economy and a more positive society. So I'm very positive that the ecosystem is driving towards that. And I also think as a venture capitalist, there is a responsibility that you have to try and be part of that positive system change. Because when you look at the companies that define the economy today, they are companies in the whole that have been backed by venture capitalists. And we anticipate that will continue to be the case in the future.
Maybe just for a minute, we can talk about, there's some great examples of companies you've invested in. And actually, you've talked a couple of times about businesses that really achieve some scale. When it all goes right and it goes well, what's the sort of journey that these companies go on to make that system change that you're talking about? Because you invest in them quite early stage, don't you?
So we do invest very early stage. We often invest in companies as they're incorporating, as we're sort of very focused on investing in these shared value concepts with fantastic people. So the journey varies by different company type, and we think there's a whole range of different ways that you can build fantastic companies. But the companies that we invest into most typically follow a journey where they achieve certain milestones, and then they go on to sort of raise certain capital. How we think about it internally is, how do you reach your first 100,000 of revenue? How do you reach your first £1 million of revenue? How do you reach your first 10, 50, 100? As we think revenue is a really good milestone of starting to sort of scale into like a large company, and then having the resource to double down on hiring great people and continuing to drive that sort of system change.
And sometimes I suppose some of these businesses don't go well in every portfolio. And certainly I imagine you've seen a lot when you've done your founder assessments and you've talked to the leaders. What are the sort of things that go wrong? You know, you've been working in this sector for a little while now. I bet there's some patterns that come through.
Yeah, definitely. So I think failure is part of the venture capital model and of being an entrepreneur. So we're very comfortable with the concept of failure, and we do really try to think about fund as focusing on how big could this be if it goes right, rather than spending too much time on failure. Although we do think it's important to look at the lessons of failure. So I think failure happens on a spectrum. So sometimes it happens where a founder just doesn't find product market fit. So what they believed or what their thesis was isn't true. That is unfortunate, but it definitely happens. Sometimes it happens because the fundraising market has changed or the environment has changed. They're no longer able to raise capital. And sometimes it happens because the entrepreneur no longer wants to run that business, which is always the case. I guess we really try to avoid.
Yes.
But, you know, I think in the best case, often those companies find a different home where they're able to continue to scale. And in the worst case, they unfortunately end up in administration.
Yeah. Well, I guess, you know, all these things happen and you get to see the good and the bad. And as you say, in your space, failure is part of the model. So it's helpful just to hear some of those things. But there's a sector at the moment which we keep in touch. We see each other occasionally, but we don't get a chance to see each other that much. So I follow what you're doing on social media, and there is a sector that seems just very close to the values that Eka promote, and which is going through very positive change. And there's lots of growth in the market, and that's around women's health. And I see you talking a lot about that. It's clearly a topic which you know, has energized you, and that you are interested in and investing in. Can we talk some more about that, please?
Definitely. So women's health is a really key investment theme for us. We first sort of wrote our sort of initial thesis on it as we were raising the fund in 2020. So when you look at the data, women live in bad health for 25% more of their time than men. The World Health Organization believes it's $1 trillion opportunity by 2040. And the real reason behind, we believe a lot of the reason behind that is that the healthcare system has traditionally not incorporated women's health into their data. So clinical trials up until the sort of early 2000s often only were run on men. So women just weren't included in those clinical trials. Often that was because the pharmaceutical companies were concerned about the impact of hormones and the drugs wouldn't work. Really, really crazy. You're running a clinical study. You know these drugs aren't going to work on women, so you just run a clinical trial with men. But the result of this is we think the technology is now good enough. There's entrepreneurs in the market that want to change this, and that runs across the whole spectrum of a woman's life, from very early care all the way through to elderly care. And we would like to invest across that whole spectrum. In Fund 1, we made one investment in the space into a business called Jude, which is focused on incontinence. crazy stat that I didn't know until I started looking at the space is 1 in 3 women globally experience incontinence at some point in their life. And there's virtually no solution for that. And so Jude set out to solve that. They have one sort of hero product at the moment, which is a supplement that helps people sort of manage their incontinence. Incredible results, already impacting tens of thousands of women in the UK in a positive way.
Hearing the story is a terrible story, and it shouldn't have happened, but you can kind of almost chart back and see that happening, can't you? If you go back and look at the scientists of old and all the way through history, it's always men, and always has been, and making very kind of male-oriented decisions. And it sounds like it's gone on far too long, but you're now starting to make a difference, and starting to ensure that the funds are flowing towards understanding how the female body quite obviously works very different from a male body, produces children, and all of the additional medical dimensions to that. And so that was your first investment at Jude. But there've been many more, haven't there?
There have been many more. And actually we're, so in 2025, we will have made 3 new investments in women's health, 2 of which we've announced and we can talk about, and one focused on endometriosis, which we can't yet. But we're so excited. I think the quality of entrepreneurs coming out and trying to solve this problem is absolutely extraordinary. So we've made one investment into a business called Ditto Daily, founded by a PhD nutritionist called Alice, and her key insight was there's been an increasing body of academic research over the last 10 years into women's health, but none of that has yet been translated into products that people can buy. And so they can't actually access the benefit of this research. And her vision was to translate that research into products that people can buy. Their first product launched in April of this year is called Ditto Daily. It's a menstrual health supplement that helps people manage their menstrual pain. Eka just ran a survey of 1,000 women in the UK, and they found of women who are sort of menstruating, over 80% have experienced pain. 70% of women are buying painkillers on a monthly basis. Many of the problems associated with period pain can actually be solved through nutrition, and the very early clinical study data from Ditto shows this. So we're super excited about that business and the potential it has to improve women's daily lives.
And so you're saying that rather than needing to put painkillers into their bodies, and painkillers obviously have downsides too, that more natural nutrition-based answers are out there.
100%. So having the right sort of nutritional balance of nutrients can help alleviate many of these symptoms, and do that in a way that's more effective than painkillers. So we're super excited about the potential for that.
Is this becoming a big market then now? Are there investors waking up to this and starting to back these companies?
So I would say it's early from a sort of overall fundraising perspective, but I think that it is a big market from a consumer perspective.
Sure.
So I think
half the world population,
no really good solutions.
Yeah.
So I think for products and services that come out and are efficacious, though they're going to be able to build really large revenue, profitable companies, and that will enable access to funding. So we invested in Ditto about 8 weeks ago. That business has already grown 100% since then. And I think those numbers start to get other investors excited that may be less mission-led, but are definitely economically led.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said there were a couple that you've invested in this year that you can talk about.
Yes. So the second investment that we've made is into a business called Hester Health. Hester has 2 incredible co-founders, a Dr. Sajisa, who is an OB-GYN doctor and healthcare influencer focused on maternal health, and Amanda Couples, who most recently was the MD of Airbnb in the UK and Europe. And they've come together to build a platform to improve women's health over their full lifespan. They've started by developing a product focused on postpartum care, in particular focused on postnatal depression, which is a really large problem that's underserved by the existing healthcare services within the UK, although the government has recognised that needs to change.
Yeah.
And that's the point in time for most women where their healthcare starts to diverge the most from men. We're really excited about the potential of that business.
And you hear lots of stories of women suffering from postnatal depression after having children, and then doctors not really being able to offer them a solution, and sort of, I suppose, trying antidepressants, and then continuing to have problems for years and years to come. So
it's huge. I mean, so the survey that we did found that 78% of people were dissatisfied with the mental health support
78%.
they received. 78% were dissatisfied in their sort of mental health support they received postpartum. The UK government themselves has sort of recognised it's an 8 billion opportunity, so 8 billion economic loss from postnatal related depression. This is a really huge, huge problem. But maternal services in general, we believe, is a massive opportunity. And you can see it coming through in the healthcare outcomes. So maternal deaths globally have been increasing rather than decreasing. In a world where we have improved access to healthcare, that just shouldn't be the case.
No, it shouldn't be. And it shows all sorts of access problems there. And thinking as an entrepreneur as well, you start to imagine the deficit that this brings into the workforce as well, on a sort of very practical level, when women are unable to do their jobs the way they want to because of the impacts of all of these aspects of women's health that your portfolio companies are working on.
Hugely. And I think that's one of the areas we definitely see as a potential route to market, is working with employers to ensure that women have great quality support and healthcare, so that when they come back to work off parental leave, they're really able to operate at full capacity.
Mm-hmm. Again, a really positive use of your funds and your time and your focus as a business. And I'm sure that our listeners here are going to be able to take a lot away from that, and have confidence that these, huge societal concerns are starting to get the focus that they need.
Yeah, I believe the wave of entrepreneurs coming out now really has the ambition to tackle these huge opportunities, and create amazing businesses that drive this societal value out of the other side.
What I love about all of this is it's not just building another app for something. That's sort of the cliche of fundraising in the venture world, to build a new app to do something that's better than Uber or something like that. And this is just kind of in a completely different space, different mindset, and there's a beauty to it.
We hope so. I mean, we get up excited or inspired by the entrepreneurs we're working with every day.
Yeah. And that brings me sort of to my final question, really, which is, I'm sure there'll be lots of people interested in this interview, Camilla, and maybe some of them will come to it a bit later. So, if someone was listening to this podcast in 5 years' time, what's the thing that you would really like them to take away from it?
I think the one thing I'd really like them to take away from it is, if they believe in a system change enough, anyone can make that happen. And entrepreneurship is a route to making that happen. So please do go out and build the companies that you're thinking about, and make that help drive that change. Take the agency and just do it. Love it. Yeah, exactly. Better articulated. Yeah. Just do it. Just do it. Yeah. I think that's been used before. But anyway, thank you, Camilla, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for having me.